This podcast is made possible by you, the supporters of WPLN and WNXP, Nashville Public Radio. This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's May 11th, 2026. On this day in 1816, the American Bible Society formed. The impetus was to start printing and distributing Bibles in the United States. Between the Revolution and the War of 1812, trade between the U.S. and England was not great, to say the least. The Bible was one of those items that just really wasn't being exported from the U.K. anymore. At the same time, a Christian movement was emerging that could only work if its members had direct access to the scriptures. And yesterday was the birthday of a Tennessean who had become one of that movement's more important figures, and whose influence is still felt in some of Tennessee's largest religious communities. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. Tolbert Fanning was born in Cannon County on May 10, 1810. When northern Alabama was opened up to white settlement, his family moved to the far northwest corner of that state, and there, when he was 16, a traveling preacher came through with a message about stripping away the traditions and dogma of the established Protestant denominations. The idea was to rely on the Bible and nothing but the Bible to understand God, to form a sense of right and wrong, to figure out how to worship, to be a day-to-day guide on how to live. Fanning was deeply moved by the idea. He was immediately baptized. And within a couple of years, he was out on the road himself, serving as a missionary back here in Middle Tennessee. He'd become an active participant in what scholars now call the Restoration Movement. The idea was that organized religion had strayed too far from what the church was supposed to be. The goal was to restore church practices to something the original apostles would recognize. In a way, it was a natural outgrowth of American revolutionary thought. Instead of shaking off onerous tax policies, the impetus for the initial leaders of the Restoration Movement was shaking off denominational rules and regulations they considered too narrow or restrictive. And restoration ideas sprung up simultaneously from people chafing under the umbrella of several different church groups. Two of the most influential figures were Barton Stone, who was a minister in the Presbyterian Church before breaking off to do his own thing, and Alexander Campbell, who was rethinking how he'd been taught to do things in the Baptist Church. When the two met, they found they'd independently settled on very similar ideas. They essentially joined forces, bringing together about 25,000 followers all combined. They called themselves simply Christians, nothing more than that, and their congregations became known as Churches of Christ. Stone and Campbell's first meeting happened right around the time Tolbert Fanning was converted to the movement, and in the same year that they officially joined together, in 1832, Fanning started working directly with Campbell, traveling and preaching in communities around Tennessee and Kentucky. Fanning eventually settled here in Middle Tennessee. Before the Civil War, he lived at a home called Elm Crag on roughly the same spot where the Nashville airport is now. After the war, he moved to Franklin. In both places, he operated a school where boys worked on a farm and delved deep into Bible study. Several of his students became foundational leaders in the next generation of the Restoration Movement, folks like David Lipscomb. He also established and edited a periodical that lasted right up until the COVID-19 pandemic called Gospel Advocate. In the absence of any kind of denominational governing body, publications like the Gospel Advocate served as an important venue for communication between congregations and a place to work through ideas of doctrine. Fanning's publication became one of the most influential of the bunch, and it evolved to be a company that offered things like Sunday school materials. Tolbert Fanning died in 1874. By the end of the 19th century, the movement he helped foster had grown to include more than 1 million American Christians. Now, as often happens in Protestant groups, there have been schisms. Religious bodies that can trace back to the 19th century movement Fanning fostered now worship under the names Church of Christ, Disciples of Christ, and Independent Christian. Around our area, lots of private schools and colleges are essentially descendants of his work. Nashville Christian, Middle Tennessee Christian, Columbia Academy, Clarksville Christian, those are all Church of Christ schools. Good Pasture School and Lipscomb University are both named for men who followed in Fanning's place as editors of the Gospel Advocate. And in some ways, many of the non-denominational congregations that are a growing presence all over the South are following at least one basic message of what Fanning, Stone, and Campbell preached so long ago. Forget the structure and strictures of a big denomination. Let's just come together Open up the Bible and go from there. In just a few minutes, a new inclusive take on America's national pastime. That's coming up after the newscast.
Tennessee's legislature has passed a record-breaking number of anti-LGBTQ laws. I'm Mariana Baca-Yao, and as WPLN's Power and Equity reporter, I focus not only on how marginalized communities contend with those new laws, but how they come together in spite of them.
I think what gives me hope is that someone like you is covering this. Because if the overwhelming narrative is one of defeat, how can we have hope?
Listen here on 90.3 WPLN News.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Tennessee officially expanded its universal school voucher program to 35,000 seats last week when Governor Bill Lee signed the proposal into law. And already, all of those vouchers are reserved with a wait list nearly 18,000 applications long. That's according to a release from the State Department of Education. More than half of the vouchers will go to families who participated in the program this year. The rest were divvied up by priority groups that consider income, eligibility for other state voucher programs, and whether a child was previously enrolled in public school. Well, it's a familiar clash in Nashville, city versus the state, and they're back at it. Metro is alleging that this last legislative session was a, quote, assault on local control. But WPLN's Cynthia Abrams reports that, unlike in recent years, suing over such laws may not be easy.
Metro leaders, like legal director Wally Dietz, feel this session was unprecedented.
The overarching theme of this legislature was they didn't want any local governments to have any authority.
A few years ago, Metro sued over 4 laws that similarly impacted local control. But there's one distinction between those laws and the ones passed this year. Instead of targeting just Nashville's control, they impact many cities and counties statewide. That's because Tennessee's constitution says laws cannot single out certain cities. That was the basis of Metro's last round of lawsuits.
In some ways, we taught them a lesson.
State lawmakers, like Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally, say they reject the assertion that these bills were an assault on local government, and that when the state has an interest in an issue, they have an obligation to step in. Cynthia Abrams, WPLN News.
It's been a year since nearly 200 people were arrested during a series of raids by immigration and customs enforcement agents over the course of just a few days. Late last week, more than a dozen community members and advocates gathered outside of the ICE field office in North Nashville to hold a vigil for the families caught up in that action. The group lined the lawn outside with shoes representing a person detained or deported. One person attending the event told WKRN that those who were deported have no way of getting the things back that they left behind. The city of Clarksville expects to raise its property tax in the coming budget year, up 31 cents. That will put the rate at $1.23 for every $100 of assessed value. The move would mark roughly a 33% increase, and it follows a smaller property tax hike last year. Clarksville Mayor Joe Pitt says this is the hardest budget he's worked on in nearly 8 years on the job, and that growth and inflation are factors. Clarksville Now reports the proposed budget also puts several capital projects on hold, with the mayor saying some buildings will get necessary repairs, but the city won't launch new projects until its finances stabilize. Cookeville Regional Medical Center is filing lawsuits against patients who have failed to pay for services, with more than 2,000 patients getting sued since 2021. WSMV has been tracking Tennessee nonprofit hospitals that are taking part in that highly scrutinized business practice. A statement from the hospital reads in part, quote, as Putnam County's only emergency room and an independent community-owned hospital, we have a responsibility to remain financially sustainable so we can continue serving our neighbors in the region. A movement is underway in Kentucky to put a statewide moratorium on data center construction. Lisa Autry with member station WKYU has more.
Erin Petrie has an insider's perspective on data centers. She spent part of her career with Amazon Web Services, helping make its data centers more sustainable. Petrie, a congressional candidate in central Kentucky, is concerned by what she calls predatory behavior by profit-driven corporations.
Their number one driver of being more sustainable, which means being a better steward of critical resources like energy, water, and critical raw materials, is government regulation.
As more and more counties are approached by data center developers, Petrie says they're left to fend for themselves when it comes to regulation. Legislation was filed in this year's General Assembly to require data centers to cover their own infrastructure costs and prevent rate hikes for local residents, but the measure stalled. Petrie wants an indefinite moratorium on data center construction until state regulations are in place. She's hoping to get legislation filed for the 2027 session. I'm Lisa Autry in Bowling Green.
Aging experts say physical intimacy remains important well into old age. It can increase longevity, even promote healing after surgery. But romantic relationships later in life don't get much airtime. So This is Nashville is dedicating the next 2 weeks to the topic, from digital dating to finally embracing long-held identities.
I hadn't been in the dating field for 40 years. How do I start a conversation with someone?
I don't want to say that I would just be like, oh, I'm just, I want somebody no matter what. But I think I didn't appreciate myself like I should have.
I said, I'm coming out to you, and I think I'm going to transition to a woman. Got a couple of blank stares and a couple of glares. The funny thing is that they have become some of my best friends.
Next Stage Season 2 explores what it means to keep falling in love with others and with ourselves. Episodes air at noon, or you can find them in the This is Nashville podcast feed. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. There's a new kind of baseball field growing in popularity. It's called a miracle field. These are accessible baseball facilities that can accommodate players with special needs. For the Appalachia Mid-South Newsroom, WPLN's Cynthia Abrams reports that Nashville's looking to build one here, while Murfreesboro has had one in operation since 2017.
On a Saturday afternoon at McKnight Park in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, there's a lot of Little League games going on. But one field is quite a bit livelier than the rest.
Starting for the Orioles, number 9, Brandon Conrad.
That's because baseball at the Miracle Field isn't just a game. It's an event.
We try to make it like a major league experience for them.
That's Tam Clark, Murfreesboro's Miracle Field announcer.
They've got their picture on the big board. We give them their own walk-up music they get to choose. We get to announce them like they are the stars of the show.
Some players dance before getting up to bat. There's a second inning stretch where mascot Homer mingles with the players on the field. And there's a lot of home runs. In some ways, it feels more like a party than the sometimes overly competitive spirit of youth sports. That's because Miracle League's origins center on inclusivity.
It kind of all started with a sibling that was in a wheelchair that would sit and watch through the fence. His sibling played t-ball. He came to every practice and every game. And finally, one day, the coach decided that he would love to invite this child on the field to play.
That's Stephanie Davis, the vice president of Miracle League's national programming.
But we quickly realized that the venue was still, not going to work for any child in a wheelchair or with any walking device.
Miracle League partners with parks and rec departments, YMCAs, or other nonprofits to construct the rubberized turf fields that can accommodate wheelchairs or assistive devices. And what started as one accessible baseball diamond in Georgia soon spread to hundreds of fields across the country. The leagues also employ a buddy system that pairs the players with a volunteer. It's a system that, Davis says, forges an important relationship.
That barrier just took 2 seconds to break down when you get on the field and you just realize they're just, normal kids. They like the same things we do. They just may have a few other obstacles.
It's a place where kids want to be. But Angie Keating, the league coordinator in Murfreesboro, says it's equally as important for parents.
One of my biggest goals is to get a mama up in the stands to eat popcorn and have a Coke for 1 hour. Just 1 hour. She's not paying a therapist. She's not taking them to school and wondering what they're doing. She's sitting there watching her kid play ball.
Players aren't always kids. Murfreesboro has 2 leagues, one for ages 5 through 14 and one for anyone ages 15 and up. People with disabilities often lose access points to community when they age out of school. So inclusion of adults is a key component of Miracle League, Keating says.
They're not aging out of their disability.
Jaden Pearson is one of those adults. He says baseball is his favorite sport.
Baseball was there for me. It was perfect.
On this Saturday, he selected Starships as his walk-up song, but every week it's different. Each game holds many surprises for every player. But in Murfreesboro, they all end the same, with a home run and a tie score. For the Appalachian Mid-South Newsroom, I'm Cynthia Abrams.
We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday, so subscribe in your favorite podcasting app to make sure you never miss an episode. And if you like this, you'll probably enjoy the Nashvillager newsletter, too. Look at Perspective for more of my colleagues at Nashville Public Radio and links to the stories we're following. Sign up for those daily emails at WPLN.org/Nashvillager. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.